Greetings and welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, as always, David Danto, and it's the David's Club this week again. I have as my guest this week my friend David Smith. David, say hi to everybody. Remind everybody who you are and what you do.
Hey, everyone, I am David Smith, founder of Inflow Analysis, and happy to be here. Thanks, David. The David Club.
The David Club. We have Mr. Maldo and a few, and Mr. Michaels and some of the others. We'll get a whole David show early next year.
We should have a David show.
So we're getting close to the end of the calendar year 2023. It's been an interesting year for a lot of people. We were talking before we started recording that it's a weird market out there right now where the companies are making money. I mean, they're making huge amounts of money. Profits are off the charts in many cases, but they're still cutting heads in the tech sector. And they don't quite realize that if you have less people working in tech, that's less people buying licenses to use the products and to buy the products that you're selling, and it's hurting them in the bottom line. It's been a weird year, hasn't it?
It has been very weird. It's funny. I just did my own sort of live show. I think it was last week with a gentleman from a company called AIQ, and we're talking about this very thing, where they seem to, especially after planning season, there seems to be this, this knee-jerk reaction, for cutting, head count, right, layoffs and all that. And there's a lot of times better ways to actually deal with harvesting budgets from technology, spend. And so, but companies just have this draconian measure of just defaulting to headcount, and again, always around holiday time. It's like people have lives, right? And one of the things I thought we learned from the pandemic was the experience of your employees. I think that sort of fell by the wayside a little. But yeah, I think you're right. It is sort of a weird environment that we find ourselves in right now.
Yeah, it's just getting on it. And we were also talking about the UC industry in general. And by the way, next week's show, for everybody who's watching now, we're going to try and stretch out the video conference, the Zoom here. We'll probably have 10 or 12 guests, analysts and industry people, just to do some, recap and predictions. But you get your spotlight now for just you on this one. It's interesting that it looks like the collab space, which I've covered for decades and you've covered for a long time, looks like it's sort of commoditizing. There's a lot of the companies that are cutting back on some of the products. A lot of the analysts are thinking, this might be past its prime, even though it's made everybody survive during the pandemic. But now people are saying, oh, that's old hat. Old hat is a year ago. And you were pointing out that a lot of the manufacturers, without naming a lot of them, they're not moving the markets anymore. There's no message, or you would put there's no soul anymore.
Exactly. They're in this sort of me too, or we're doing this too. Environment, especially when we talk about Gen AI, right, which is the big thing. So every conference I've been to this past year, right, everyone has some AI thing. And I love your article this week on AI demos. I thought it was pretty pithy and so accurate, because we see these demos that are real time, but obviously they're baked in. And to your point, I think we have to try this stuff ourselves. But yeah, we're seeing in the collab space itself, just everyone's trying to out AI each other, but it's the same thing, right? One's calling a co-pilot, one's calling a companion. It's different words for the very same thing that they're all doing, right? Meeting summaries and some other little.
Yeah, it was interesting. You read my article, but yesterday also John Chambers posted an article saying that he believes the AI is a bubble. And he thinks companies are going to get caught in that as well. So, it's very odd when you see John Chambers and I agreeing on anything. So that's a historical comment going back to telepresence, but with the big P. But it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's not a lot of opportunity to really engage with people from a sense of this is our mission and this is our strategy. So I think we've kind of lost some of that messaging amidst this whole "you must return to the office" thing.
Yeah, and so that's I think again with the AI stuff, because they're doing a lot of stuff where meeting summaries and everything around the meeting. But this whole move to then return to the office, and I think most companies were trying to normalize around what a 3-day in, 2-day out thing. I'm seeing that become the average across the board. But again, it's still a mandate, right? And that's we're moving back to the sort of mandate to get back in. And I think that ship has sailed, right?
Yeah, we're at about 60-something% return to office, which, as you point out, turns out to be about 3 days a week. And Nick Bloom, who covers this stuff for Stanford, has shown that we've kind of flatlined. And as we flatlined that nobody's returning to anything anymore that they haven't already returned to, the the productivity is going up, and corporate profits are going up.
Yeah.
So again, it's more of a social and moral fight, or a class fight, going on in the office. And I got a feeling that we're going to turn the page on that, not right now,
Yeah.
but within
Yeah.
2024 we're going to stop even talking about it.
And funny, a question for you too, and because you've covered this space, especially on the AV side a lot. Is there, or do you think there is some notion to the fact that based on the real estate investments is part of what's pushing
Oh
this
yeah.
trend in the office? Yeah.
Yeah, the you have to look at this in a much bigger picture than most of the technology people have so far. You've
Yeah.
got companies that got tax breaks and tax benefits based on a commitment that they'll have X number percentage of people employed in the city, because the
Hmm.
city believes they'll get tax revenue from coming in and buying lunch and using public transportation and things like that. And in a
Yeah.
lot of places, they're not meeting their numbers. So it has nothing to do with the productivity of the company, which is what it should
Hmm.
have to do with, or with the
Yeah.
with happiness of the employee, which is what it should be all about. It has to do with companies worried about being left holding the bag for these real
Yeah.
estate commitments that they haven't met. And the answer is going to be more big cities are going to use mixed use properties. There's going to be more retail, and there's going to be more
Hmm.
housing in downtown
Yeah.
areas. It'll sort of spread out a little bit. That's not an easy thing.
Yeah.
HVAC, plumbing, egress. There are a lot of things. You can't just take an office building and let people sleep in it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be expensive, but it's inevitable. That's
It's
society has moved in that direction. We've opened the doors to it.
yeah.
Nobody's going to close them again.
It's funny, not to take this tangent on that, but this year I went to the Salesforce Dreamforce conference, and it is the cleanest I've ever seen San Francisco in a long time. And it was interesting how, they did this for the Salesforce conference, which was, I think they were threatening to leave the city for the Dreamforce conference in the following year. But it's amazing how, I saw police presence in the extended neighborhoods
Yeah.
around like Union Square, like way down. And so it was interesting that they could have, just in that one week, clean up the whole thing. And so there is that synergy, as you're talking about, between, companies and cities and how they're investing in their orgs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're I've said this probably for 3 years now. I'll say it again. You can't really realize how much of an upheaval you're going through while you're going through it.
Yeah.
We're going to look back at this time in 5 years or 10 years and say, look at what happened. Look at what happened to cities. Look at what happened, from a political standpoint, which we're not going to get into, but what's moving from cities, what's moving urban and suburban, and, how are we shifting, and what's the dynamic with work? But it's still such a churn in progress right now that, you can only kind of sit back and say, yeah, I wouldn't be investing in commercial real estate right now. And you'll see as leases come up, people will be dropping their leases, and in many cases they're abandoning them now anyway,
Yeah,
because it's not,
absolutely.
we've learned that it's not needed. So, and then the economy will pick up in other areas, as you see, because how many billions did Microsoft invest in OpenAI, and how many, it's the money is
Wow.
still out there. It's just a little bit different.
Yeah,
So so
that was a whole wild event with the whole OpenAI thing. How that was
yeah, we could spend the whole
yeah.
whole webinar talking about Mr. Altman and OpenAI. And wow, yeah, there's a lot of things to learn there. The last piece on AI that I'll say is, and I've written this as well, is people are definitely imagining AI wrong. And it's not their
Mhm.
fault. You've got a lot of companies talking about how fabulous it is and how it's going to be a game changer, and it's our new UI, and it's this and it's that, and it slices and dices, and can it core apple? That's an
Yeah.
old honeymooners joke. The truth is, you don't want to picture AI as Superman. You want to picture
Yeah.
AI as a staircase. And it goes all the
Yeah.
way up to the heavens, and maybe next year, maybe we'll do like 4 steps. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a long journey. We're just starting it now. Let's not assume it's going to change everybody's business. Let's be cautious. Let's make sure the step's stable before we step on it.
Mhm.
I think it's going to be terrific, but we're just starting out now.
Yeah, and you're right. I think there's a lot of overselling, and we saw that, not to bring up the dog days of crypto and so forth, but we are seeing the grift phase, right? When there's told 5 steps to get your prompts back, right? And it's like, oh my God,
Hype,
here
hype,
we go.
hype storm. It's all of the hype storms. It did the one thing that I really appreciate from AI is it knocked the word metaverse off of the social media pages. So that's a
It did. Although I saw, AI and AR VR article there. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. They're trying to bring it together.
Yeah. Well, my thing about AR and VR is Blair Pleasant, a good friend of both of ours, asked the other day, how come when I see avatars in virtual reality, they're only from the waist up, there's nothing underneath them. And I told him it's very simple, because the technology doesn't have any legs. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's an ultra. So let's shift from that topic, and let's talk about what we really should talk about from a technology standpoint is from a human factors piece,
Yeah.
from a workflow standpoint. All of this technology coming in around AI and around collaboration and suites that we work on and all the rest of it's going to change the way we work. But employees and employers still need to manage teams effectively. They still need to be able to, first of all, they need to learn how to manage a workforce that isn't in the
Hmm.
office all the time, which which
Absolutely.
which is a skill that's existed for decades, but we haven't really taught it to middle managers. And then, one of the things I know you've been talking about recently is, how do you manage when you've got an employee that's not right for the team or not doing the right things? And I don't think companies really understand that at this point.
They have it. Yeah, gosh, I remember, and not to take this back several years, but I remember when we first started getting into, AI, machine learning and prediction. And I remember companies, would spring up, based in Utah, or wherever, and HR, predictive recruiting, predictive hiring. I'm just like, oh God. And so the one thing, so from that day till now, the one thing that's still never been really addressed is, we talk about, we give voice to like ethics and bias, and even toxicity. But so how do you, and every system talks about toxicity detection and bias detection, but how do you actually even address that stuff? And to your point, especially when you talk about it in a team dynamic where there's actual people involved, how do you address that stuff in real time? Because that, you're then now talking about the health of the team and the culture of the organization.
Yeah, and the one thing we learned, and this is part of the IMCCA wrap-up videos, which if you haven't seen, I'll post a link down here so that you can go over to it, and take a look at, there's an article that lists all five of them. But we were talking specifically about how we're not really doing a good job training managers that are
Yeah.
managing, a workforce. We're not really doing a good job training managers at all. We used to, you've heard it, the anecdote a million times, that you take the best performer and they get promoted by being a manager, but it might be a different skill set. They don't know how to deal with people.
Exactly.
It's historically, it's been very difficult to get people to be leaders, without training, without management, and in many cases without empathy. And you can't teach
Absolutely.
empathy. People either have it or they don't. So, how to manage through a toxic employee is one of the most important pieces. How to identify when your employees are struggling,
Hmm.
especially if they're not in the office every day or you're not in the office every day. How do you become their friend? And then how to use
Yeah.
a management style that's productive, that's progressive. I mean, a lot of the stack ranking and the Welch management style, which I can't stand, and I've said that before a million times.
Jack
Um, you know, the
Welch.
the idea that 10% of my employees are bad and I'm going to get rid of them, and
Yeah,
10%
yeah.
of them are great. I wouldn't want to work on a team that isn't all made of stars. I don't have
Absolutely.
a bad 10%. So I think we need to kind of relearn a lot of that as well.
Yeah, and again, and not to get into this, but I think a lot of that obviously is tied to, who then the board is beholden to, and sometimes it's, outside investors. And so that's where these decisions are made. And so you're right. We have this profit center that we have to sort of hit these numbers and EBITDA and so forth. And then the first thing, like we mentioned before, the first thing that gets hit, knee-jerk reaction, budget issues, right? And that impacts culture. And so there needs to be a refocus on culture, which I thought, we were giving big lip service to it during the pandemic. Oh my God, we're all about the employees now and well-being. And remember, well-being was like the buzzword, right? Before it was AI and well-being, right? But we're seeing now with mandates, return to office and just even just, trying to force people back in the office, toxic environments. We're seeing that there needs to be more of a refocus on, okay, who are the people that are actually making this happen? Who are the people that held you down during the pandemic, that caused profitability, to even rise to where we're seeing the profits now? How do you sort of refocus on those people and make their organization more human and people centric?
Yeah, you got my hand trembling right now because I'm so upset about the one company, to remain nameless, that said everybody must be back in the office. Not one of the companies
Yeah,
I work for. It's not one of the companies I work for, but one of the bigger companies in the world, saying everybody has to be back because we must improve our culture. Culture is the most important thing for us. And then they fire people at midnight using emails. So to say that culture is the most important thing in the world,
Yeah,
to drop a bomb on their own culture,
yeah,
it just tells you they're saying whatever is convenient. And back in my history, one company that I worked for, to remain nameless, everybody knew that HR was not a place to go to when you had a problem because HR protected the leaders. That's been
exactly.
a,
Yeah,
a symptom of toxicity at companies for many
mhm,
years, that the HR is there to make sure bad stories don't get out. One of the things that I've learned in my career, and this is one that I've learned recently, and we'll leave it at that, is no
yeah,
company really wants to do the good that they claim they want to do. They just don't want to be called out for doing bad. So, that's something to
exactly.
keep in the back of your mind. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
difficult, and we haven't really figured out how to manage that, especially now that, and again, I don't want to get political, but you have a lot of
yeah,
the EI initiatives, which are all really terrific, but you've got a lot of people now on the business side of things saying, no, that was
yeah.
a waste of time, and you shouldn't be doing that. So, politics gets into everything.
It does. It's funny. I spent HR. So one of the things I cover from a digital workplace perspective is HR tech, right? And I remember a HR conference several years ago where one of the speakers gets up and says, "It's time to bring the human back into HR." And I'm like, they never left, right? They've been there the whole time. You just neglected them.
Yes. Well, it's not. It went from HR, human resources, to people, right? People and culture
Yeah,
is what the euphemism is, and I don't know what the euphemism will be next year, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's always change the label, but don't actually change any of the things. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly. And to even to your point about DI, like for if you really commit to DI, that means the DI, lead executives job should end at some point. Right? That's the idea is for that job to accomplish something, right? And if there's no
yes.
if there's no metrics or accountability, no KPIs to actually make that happen, then that's just C-level
Well,
executive. That's yeah.
yeah, we've also got the wrong KPIs. That's another thing we were talking
Yeah.
about before. This is going to turn into an anger session. I don't want to do it. But we had the example that one large music playout company the other day let go 17% of their workforce, which then
Mhm.
caused stock to bump because Wall Street likes it when you lay people off, and then he
Yeah.
cashed out some millions of dollars. And there should be an inherent conflict of interest between letting people go, which ends careers and puts people in jeopardy and all that,
Hmm.
and profiting from it. There's got
Yeah.
to be some way, and it goes back to what I've been saying for years, and this is one of the most important pieces of advice that I'll give people looking for work or looking to grow in their career, is forget the company that you're working for. It's all well
Mhm.
and good to work for stable companies or companies near your geography or companies whose mission you believe in. That's nice. That is not nearly as important as working for people that you get along with, that you respect and
Absolutely.
trust. I'd rather work for a great manager at a dinky company than for a terrible manager at a large company.
Absolutely.
Your direct manager is really one of the most important parts of your career.
No, absolutely. And I think to your point earlier, where we saw a lot of companies who touted employee experience and engagement and positive work environments, were some of the biggest companies with the biggest layoffs. And I'm not gonna name any names, but I mean it was like, whoa, I thought it was all love and kumbaya and everything. And it's like,
Yeah, profitable companies laying off employees for their stock to go up. It's a
exactly.
weird phenomenon. I guess it's the weirdest market we've ever seen. So let's talk a couple of minutes about what you see, since we're doing our prediction show next week.
Yeah.
What do you think were the biggest stories of this year, and what do you think are going to be one or two of the biggest things to come out of next year in your thinking cap?
Yeah. I mean, you could probably answer my sentence, but obviously, Gen AI, Open AI, and I think it's because the thing is, and you probably get this, where it's good, right? I mean, it at its basic level, it's a good thing, right? I think it's just the overhyping and everyone trying to grift off it is sort of what turns it into a lot of cons, from bias and ethics and just people trying to sell you stuff about it. But I think definitely we're going to see some more sort of more human customization around AI. I think we're going to see some more competitors emerge. There's OpenAI, obviously, the big thing, but we're definitely going to see some more competitors, I believe, emerge. And I think we're going to see a reckoning around ethics and bias emerge as well, too, in terms of dealing with that.
Okay, good predictions, David. If somebody wants to reach out to you, maybe work with you for something else, the best way for them to get in touch with you.
Yeah, on I guess Twitter, was it X now? Twitter X. I
Yeah,
am Dave. I'm Dave Mario. You can also reach me via email at dave@inflowanalysis.com. And yeah, thanks.
terrific. Yeah, no, I'm generally I'm now on Mastodon and Blue Sky
Yeah, yeah,
and Threads, and I'm trying to stay away from
yeah. You can
toxic
totally edit that
environments like
out.
Twitter.
Yeah, you
Yes.
can totally edit that
No, no,
out.
we'll leave it. It's fine. There are still some people using it, but I
Yeah,
just feel kind of strongly that it's jump the shark.
yeah,
That's the term.
exactly.
Thank you
And
very
on
much.
LinkedIn, and LinkedIn at David Smith. So that's it. You
Terrific.
go.
David, thanks very much for being with me, and always a pleasure to see you. When will the next time be that I see you? Will be Enterprise Connect?
Yes, EC. Yeah, I think that's the next beginning of the year, right? In March. Yeah,
March sometime. Yeah, I'll be at
yeah.
CES in a few weeks, but
Oh,
not
that's
everybody goes to
right.
that one. If you
Yes,
do, let me know. We'll get together. But if not, we'll definitely get together at Enterprise Connect and do a little bit of this kind of stuff in person.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, terrific. And thank you guys for watching every week. We really do appreciate it. I'm David Danto, and we'll see you next week for our predictions and wrap-up show with a lot of guests. So see you then.